Now it's gone.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. This is our 89th episode, recorded on Wednesday, December 6th, 2023. I'm your host, Jeff Marlowe, joined today by my co-host, Kathy Amos, and we'll be previewing Indiana's first Big Ten opponent, Rutgers, as well as giving out some first quarter report card grades, and also looking and seeing if we can figure out some unanswered questions here. But today, as usual, we will start this show with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel. All right. And our sponsor of the banner moment. And Kathy, the banner moment, we didn't have much news over the weekend, and except for the win against getting the win against gone brain dead here. Stetson, getting the win against Stetson. But I think I'm going to go banner moment here. I think I'm going to go banner moment here is just that, again, Mackenzie Holmes, as she kind of climbs up the record book, she is now officially the all-time leader in field goals made at Indiana. So again, I kind of go with that as our banner moment today. And again, as we said, our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, who includes the Assembly Call and Crimson Cast. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools. Or updating their products for schools in their existing line. You're bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. Right now, they have their mystery boxes back, but I think that was a one-day only thing. But you can check the website of that. At least the email I had from yesterday didn't let me pull it up today, because I was thinking about that same thing. They also, if you are watching us live, they are running a special today for 20% off. But I imagine that ends at midnight tonight. So you would have to probably be watching us on the live feed on YouTube. But they do have some great stuff on there, and you are supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelley School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME, HOME23, to get 15% off your entire first order. Again, that's promo code HOME, HOME23, for 15% off. And once again, the website is Home Field Apparel, homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. Yeah, and since we just talked to you on Saturday, just on Sunday, not a ton of news here this week, except IU did jump up 2 spots in the AP poll to number 15, and they jumped up 1 spot in the coaches poll to number 16 this week. And also, I did post this in the Substack. If you haven't had a chance to see it, you can go find that. I guess I should have included this. They are number 28 in the first initial net ranking that came out from the NCAA on Monday. And then also Charlie Cream still has them as a number 2 seed in his bracketology that was released on Tuesday as well. And Kathy, I thought the most interesting thing there, of course, kind of the headline, and again, it's still December, but Charlie Cream had UConn at a number 5 seed. And that would be, I can't tell you when would be the last time UConn wouldn't have hosted at all. They as a 5 seed, they would have to go on basically the road from there on,
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. Again, it's still December, but it just shows you the parity in the game. And I want to kind of ask you a little bit about that before we even get to the Amos angle, kind of the news, because you and I were watching some games over the weekend, texting back and forth. Ohio State looked very good down at Tennessee. We just saw the score. Michigan got beat at Toledo today.
Handily.
Yeah. Iowa is tied or was tied at the half with Iowa State. Yeah. Just, again, sometimes we're neutral observers with other teams, but just the parity in the game has really, and so I'm not sure you're going to see those UConn type runs anymore where they go to Final Four after Final Four. I mean, even for as good as South Carolina is that right now, it's still, there's so much parity in the game. What do you think?
Yeah, I was just reminding myself, I was pulling up all the games, mainly from Sunday from this week, from the top 25. And, we had Stanford go and get beat. Now, We know that Cameron Brink didn't play, but a quarter and a half of that game, she had an illness. So she ended up sitting out, but still they lost by almost 20 points, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And then you have other top 25 teams getting beat. UConn got beat by Texas by 12. Stanford lost to Gonzaga 96-78. Ohio State, as you mentioned, they beat Tennessee on the road in Tennessee, but they beat them by 20. So it wasn't like it was even close. Other teams that I was kind of watching, we had Princeton climbed into the top 25, got beat. Penn State climbed into the top 25. They got beat by West Virginia on Monday. So even, teams that, finally start, inching their way up, then all of a sudden they turn around and lose, to your point, and to unranked teams as well. And so I think we're going to see a lot more noise in the women's rankings than maybe we have in years past coming into this year. So I find it very fascinating to watch all of those top 25 matchups. At least, I try to check the scores. I can't always watch the games due to work wants me to work kind of thing, and other things that are going on in our lives. But, I do like to try to check out the score and see how things are going. And, like the Penn State, they were surprising this year, right? They were like Illinois from last year, kind of came out of nowhere, not really on anyone's radar. And all of a sudden they cracked the top 25. As soon as they crack the top 25, they turn around and lose that next game. So I just think it's really fascinating. And it's a fun time for it. And it's going to be really a lot harder come March when we start filling out our brackets too, because I think we're going to see a lot more upsets, kind of like we did last year.
Yeah. And before we move on here with this, I think you're also, as we're talking about, again, it's still December, but right now the Big Ten's a little bit of a precarious spot in bracketology. I mean, Michigan and Michigan State have looked good so far in the preseason. You mentioned Penn State. But but you get the real feeling that this, that unless somebody like Nebraska and Maryland is down in the bracketology for obvious reasons, you get the real feeling here that it could end up being about a 5-bid league if you're not careful. And, because, Purdue has not performed up to where people thought they were going to be. And we'll have to wait and see through the Big Ten season if Michigan and Michigan State and Penn State can continue to do what they've done. So I thought you brought some great points there with that. And here we'll throw it over to Kathy for the official Amos angle here, we'll say, and just see if she's got anything. Yeah, well, but let's see if you got anything on your mind about IU women here, rather than kind of the national scene.
Yeah, I was going to use actually the national scene. That's so funny that you did that. We didn't talk about that beforehand, everybody.
Nope.
That we're both going to talk about that separately. And neither knew. Yeah, I mean, nice quiet week for the women. Coming into officially starting Big Ten play here on Saturday, as we'll talk about in a minute against Rutgers. So it's a good time for them in terms of what's kind of coming up on their docket. They've got a week off here, assuming it's for finals. So hopefully they can get that kind of stuff out of the way. And, they had Stetson, they had Rutgers coming up. They have Evansville after that, Bowling Green State before then on New Year's Eve to close out the year with Illinois coming to town, which, at least on paper looks to be probably of that stretch that we started talking about really with the Stetson game, kind of a get right kind of thing after that main trip, if you will, and kind of making sure that everything's on track with the, in the rails, their defense is on and working on some of the things that we'll, I'm sure, talk about here later in the show.
Yeah, I agree. And let's move on to talking about Rutgers, our first Big Ten opponent. They'll be our next opponent. That game is Saturday, December the 9th. And we will remind you again later in the podcast here, but we will be doing the post-game show on Sunday. The IU men also play Saturday at 1. So it does kind of maybe help out a little bit that we're not overloading the fan base.
Back-to-back basketball.
Yeah, the men will be playing Auburn in Atlanta. And then the women be playing Rutgers at Rutgers. That game is a 4 Eastern time start, 3 Central, and it is on regular BTN, regular Big Ten network. So you don't need your Big Ten Plus or your Peacock or anything else like that right now as well. And I do want to say this, Kathy, before we get into talking about Rutgers, I saw a lot of this yesterday because the men's game was on Peacock last night. And I get that, but this is one of those things. When you talk about the football program and NIL, you talk about the basketball programs and NIL, the part of that, and maybe not so much the NIL, but the exposure that you're recruiting these kids on and everything that you're doing, a lot of, I shouldn't say everything because I don't know all the finances, but some of the things you're doing facilities wise and things like that, that's because of this media deal the Big Ten has signed that you're now into the first year of with Fox and NBC, CBS, and Peacock's included in that. So if that money has, gets coming from somewhere, and this is part of that media deal. We may not like it, but you're gonna have to live with it. And I know, for example, people who watch the NFL, Thursday night still struggle because they don't really want to get an Amazon Prime subscription, but that's the only way you can watch Thursday night football. So, right. It is what it is. But just get real quickly what you think about all the different streaming avenues for, especially BTN Plus. I mean, we do a BTN Plus already, but about Peacock and things like that.
Yeah. I'm not surprised we knew this was coming. Right. So I'm kind of surprised a little bit how some people seem surprised by it. But I mean, we knew when they announced the TV contracts that came out that a lot of these games are going to be on Peacock. For me personally, I have most of them anyway. Yep. So it's not really too big of a deal. There's just some of the streaming services, the production obviously is just not there yet. Like I thought the ESPN Plus was the worst in terms of commentators and coverage when the women played on there. One of their, which game was that? Was that Maine. The Maine game? Yeah, that was Maine, right? Yeah, I thought that was the worst. I didn't have any personal issue with Peacock. I thought it was fine last night, other than Bardo being on there. He's not my favorite. But in terms of, I have it already installed on my smart TV with an app, so maybe that was different than if you're streaming in a different way. But I didn't have any issues in terms of buffering or sound or anything like that. I thought it was just fine. But ESPN Plus was terrible. And those Big Ten Plus, I think, has gotten better. The one advantage I kind of like of them, like Big Ten Plus in particular, they show you the timeouts and things in between and half times, and you don't get that with the regular TV. So that's kind of a bonus that I kind of like, actually.
Yeah, and that ESPN Plus, I'm betting, was more of a local production because, I know, when Valpo has a game at home in Valpo, and it'll be a lot of times they'll be on ESPN Plus with the Valley and stuff. That I know a couple of the people who do their broadcasts and stuff, so I know that's more locally produced, more of a local type, production. And this ESPN is just picking it up as part of their contracts and stuff. But yeah, that main broadcast, they were struggling that night. We were joking back and forth. The Student U Productions, I think, do a better job than that group was doing
Absolutely.
That night. So anyway,
they were not good.
So anyway, back to Rutgers here real quick. This is where it's supposed to be our focus, not TV critics here. IU 7-6 all time versus the Scarlet Knights, winning the last 4 in a row. IU won last year in Bloomington, 91-68. Rutgers is 6-5 on the season. They're 6-3. Actually, they're 6-5, I believe now, 6-3 at home. 6-2 at home. Sorry, 1 road and 2 neutral site losses. So they are playing. They've got off decent record wise, but we still believe that they're still going to be toward the bottom of the Big Ten. Kathy, why don't you take over the next part here on Rutgers with the coaching staff and some of their key players?
Sure. So in terms of their head coach is Coquise Washington. She's only in her second season with Rutgers. So far she was 17-25 at Rutgers and 5-13 in the Big Ten. Previously, before that, she had 12 seasons that she was at Penn State. She was 197-149 there, or 93-94 in the Big Ten. In terms of the team so far this year in their 11 games that they've had. Goodness, season's getting away from us already. They have, they're averaging right around 71 points per game and allowing roughly 63 points per game. In terms of rebounding, they're out rebounding their opponents by a margin of about 7. And then turnovers, which is an interesting one we could probably talk about. They're averaging 19 turnovers per game and forcing 17 turnovers. So, some of that I'm sure is the opponents in terms of the opponents turnovers, but 19 turnovers per game, I think, is something that we definitely will want to keep an eye on on Saturday. In terms of players, they have Kayleen Smikely. She's a 6-foot sophomore guard. She is currently averaging 16 points per game and 5.2 rebounds, just under 3 assists and 1.8 steals per game. Last year, she made the all-freshman team, where she averaged just under 18 points a game, 4.5 rebounds, 1.6 assists, and 2 steals per game. Alongside of her is a transfer from North Carolina, Destiny Adams. She is 6'3" junior. She's listed as a guard/forward. Again, she's a transfer from North Carolina. She is currently averaging 13.3 points per game, just under 8 rebounds per game, 2 assists per game, and 2 steals per game. She was the 20th ranked recruit in her class coming out of high school. And then last, they have a third player also averaging double digits. That's Chania Cornwell. Hopefully I said that right. She is a 6'3" senior center, and she is averaging 10.7 points per game, just under 9 rebounds, and she shoots 62% field goals. So I'm assuming Chania, do you know, Jeff, is that right? China. Okay, like the country. Okay, yep. So China is probably going to be the one that Mackenzie Holmes is going to probably be going up against, and whoever else they bring to double team her.
Yeah, and again, this is one of those on paper, Indiana will be favored in this game, and I actually want to come back to this a little bit later because some of our unanswered questions with this, but it's a game where if we play a decent game, we go off, and bring some energy, bring some passion. I think this is a game because you mentioned it, 19 turnovers against what they have not played a great schedule. They lost to Texas Tech. And on a neutral site over Thanksgiving, they also got beat by Boise at the same site, Boise State. So the better teams they've played have really given, they've lost to. So Indiana, you would think, would be in that tier or above that tier. And so as long as we can play well, I think this is a game you get in and out of there, get a road victory. And again, this is one of those things you hear. I was watching, I know we're not supposed to move, but that team up north, in Indiana, Coach Painter was talking about, and I honestly believe this is what I thought Coach Knight used to emphasize quite a bit, that you got to win at home. If you want to win the league or be in the hunt at the end, you got to win at home. You got to win your home games. And then you got to find a way to steal as many as you can on the road. Well, especially against the kind of the bottom third of the league, you really need to steal those games on the road and make, because you're going to get some tough teams. Like we talked about in the preview way back a month or so ago, 6 weeks ago. Wow, it may even be 2 months ago now that we got to go to Ohio State, we got to go to Iowa. So those are not easy road games. So that's my thoughts. Kathy, what do you think about as we go into the game?
Yeah, after looking a little bit at their stats, because I'll be honest, I haven't actually been able to see Rutgers play live. It does, again, on paper, look like a game we should be able to handle. However, we thought that, as well about Maine, and we can't let, what looks like on paper to be an easy game, have our players go up to Rutgers. Again, it's on the road. And, they didn't do well at Stanford. They came out sluggish at Maine. That's what I'm going to be looking for, is that can they, right the ship here in terms of true away games? This would be one to do it. I wouldn't expect that they're going to have a huge crowd on a Sunday afternoon or probably many of their games, period. But to be honest, this is still, a road game for them. I would hope that they come out with some energy and that their defense forces at least those 19 turnovers that Rutgers is averaging per game. But at the end of the day, it's still a Big Ten. It's not going to be a cakewalk. They can't go up and sleepwalk through it either. So that's where I'm really going to be watching, is more on our side of what kind of energy can we bring, specifically on the defensive end. And then again, the other thing we've been talking about this year, which is rebounding.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and speaking of which, let's use that to kind of jumpstart us into the report card here. And, we made some predictions in our preview show, and I'll kind of remind our viewers of this. Overall record we had in Big Ten record, Kathy had Indiana going 22-6, 14-4. I had us at 23-5, 14-4. So far, Kathy, if I remember correctly, you had a couple losses. You had Stanford, and I believe Tennessee picked to lose. That's I had correct. Just the Stanford game. So we're looking pretty good on that part of it so far.
Yeah, I'm happy to be wrong. Absolutely.
We both, who would be second behind Mackenzie in scoring? We both had Sydney. And I think right now, if you looked at the actual stats, I think Sarah right now is second. So we're a little off on that, but Sydney's, in that mix, in a long way to go. And then this was the one I went back. I had to go back and watch the episode to actually remember what some of these picks were.
I was wondering how you knew that.
And who would be first off the bench? And we all said this really kind of was a tough question, because it was like, do you mean the first person who just jumps up, is like, go get in the game first, or is it the person who plays the most minutes? Well, we kind of went with that person who was the first sub off the bench. And then we all said that, we both said that was going to be Lily. And I think that probably held true. But I think we also kind of understood that just because you're first off the bench doesn't mean that you're going to be the one playing the most minutes. I think right now you probably look at, Lexi, I think you have it somewhere, and we have in the run sheet. Lexi's probably the most minutes off the bench right now. Yeah. So that's I know right. I saw it.
Yeah, that's right. So, yes, Lexi right now is, and we're debating between Lexi and Lily. But yeah, I think in terms of probably first, it's one of the two, just like we expected in terms of minutes. Lexi has been leading the bench with 19 and a half points, 19 and a half minutes per game.
Yeah.
You're right. On the scoring side. Yeah, if she had 19 and a half points, she would not be coming off the bench. So in terms of scoring, Mackenzie is obviously leading the team in scoring. She's averaging 18.3 points per game, and Sarah's right behind her at 16 and a half points per game. And that's with, a couple of the games from Sarah here being a little below her average for the season. So, she had those games down in Florida where she really just, shot the cover off the ball. Mm-hmm. She had that 28-point game in particular. And so she's been to me, a big surprise for the season, just because we weren't sure what we'd see from her. We thought, could she become the shooting 3-point shot threat that she was at Minnesota? But the thing I like about Sarah is that she's added dimension to her game. She's driving the ball more. I think her defense is a lot better. She's become just more of an all-around player, not just a 3-point specialist.
But let's remind our listeners, if they listen to us, faithfully, we had Lenny Holmes on after they got back from Greece, and he was one that said right away, he's like, you keep an eye on Sarah Scalia. He really thought she was going to have a huge season for them. So let's kind of give out some grades here. And Kathy, I'll start with you. I hate to go into individual players at this point, but let's just talk about offense in general. What kind of grade would you give the offense so far?
Yeah. So let's see, as a team right now, they're averaging 79 points per game. And shooting 49% field goal percentage, which I thought was just really fantastic. From 3-point range, they're right at 34%. So that's kind of their offensive stats. The other offensive stat that I wrote down that was really intriguing to me was assists per game, which they're averaging right at 20 assists per game. So taking all those into account, quite honestly, I would give them at least a B+ or an A-. And the only reason I would even give them a strong A here is just there have been a couple of games where the shot just won't go down. Even with the 48% field goal percentage, 34% from three, there's been some games where those 3-point percentages has been kind of dragging that number down. Otherwise, I'd give them probably a good solid A. I think, offensively, they seem to be really clicking.
Yeah, I'm going to go A- here, because I think that's a fair grade. I think, like you said, there's been a couple games, and you can't leave out the Stanford game where they just did not look very good at all, period. But they didn't play well offensively either. They didn't shoot it well. They got behind. That was a game where Mac had 0 points at the half, and so and she wasn't the only one, by the way. I'm just saying that's so. I'll go with the A-. I agree with you there. I think it's a little better than B+, but like you said, they're close to an A. But it's just, I think you talk about some of these times, especially like in the main game, they didn't play particularly well, and it showed up on the offensive end some as well. So let's take a look at the defense, Kathy. What kind of grade would you give the defense? And I got a feeling you might be a little more generous than Coach Morin would be.
Probably.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
No, probably. You're right. So in terms of defensive numbers, you got just a few here. They're only allowing right around 59 points per game, and they're turning their opponents over right around 14 points per game. I should mention that on the offensive side too. They're only turning the ball over around 11 per game, which I think Coach Morin has said 12 is their goal. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, turnover wise is good. Forcing 14 turnovers. So the thing is with the numbers, those sound really good. You have to look at some of the opponents, and kind of, to me, I think defense is more of a visual thing to grade them at. And right now, I would say probably around a C+, B-. I just think that there's more there for them. The things that concern me the most, is just the fact that we just can't seem to be able to stop really strong athletic teams still, especially ones with the dribble penetration. We saw it like down in Fort Myers, Princeton, that first half, we're really all over them, held them, had double-digit lead at one point. I think we're up to almost 20. And then all of a sudden, the second half, Princeton starts pressing. We have some problems with that, but they start driving on us. And they were really, you could just tell, like we were sitting in the crowd, sitting next to her, like, oh, here she goes. She's going to drive again. And she would score. And I think, that to me is more concerning than the actual numbers that we can see on the paper.
Yeah, but again, the game before that against Tennessee, I thought their defense was pretty rock solid.
Fantastic.
But we have seen Coach Moore. I'll go with you. I'm going to go with the B- here. But Coach Moore has called them out more than one occasion about their defense. In fact, the game I was at against Murray State, even though they scored over 100, she was not very happy with the defense. With
that was
the amount
the
of points
D game, right? Where
What's
she gave him a D? Was that the game she gave him a D?
I think so. And because there was also a game where they got, she felt like they didn't hustle back on a transition bucket, and she pretty much immediately took a timeout to let them know about it. And so there's just been instances of that. There have been times when I was watching this group that they don't seem like they're communicating all the time. They're getting caught a little bit on whether they should be switching, whether they, or are they staying with, and it's just times they're not moving their feet. So, but I think the other thing I'll point out here that to me shows up, and you talked about the rebounding stats. If you look at the pure stats right now, it looks like IU has about a +4 rebounding margin. But again, we've been out rebounded in a handful of games. And some of those have not been, like the other day against Stetson, we gave up 15 offensive rebounds. And that's where it's really showing up. And that's why I think it's even hard to give them that B- sometimes, because part of defense is also finishing the possession and getting the rebound and with that. So, so I'll give them the B-, but it has not been, and Coach Moore has said this on more than one occasion, that it's her job to get them there. I totally agree with her comment, but they also have to get better. They got to play more. They got to play more discipline on the defensive end.
Yeah, that's a great point. We hadn't talked about rebounding right now, and there have been a number of games they've been out rebounded this year, and definitely even the games that they've won, obviously, which they've only lost one games, which is most of them. There's been a few that I think the Stanford game in particular was just double digits that they were out rebounded, but that game against Stetson, there just really wasn't, it didn't seem like there was any reason for them to be getting out rebounded like that on the defensive end, other than just concentration and effort and being in the right spot at the right time. And that's something I think that is probably tied for me with most concerning, in addition to some of our defensive efforts. So, but you're right. That's a great point. They go hand in hand. You can't just play great defense. They put up a shot and miss it, and then they get the ball back and score anyway.
Yeah, and let's point out here a positive on the rebounding. Sydney Parrish is averaging just over 6 rebounds a game, and realistically, Sydney's a guard, so you got. And I realize that sometimes we play her at a forward spot, but you're really getting a guard who's giving you over 6 rebounds a game in essence. And so Sydney's trying, and that's the other thing too. I think defensively, we still have to find a way to keep some of our key people out of foul trouble. We've seen Sydney get a little foul trouble, and we've seen Yarden getting some foul trouble still. So we just we got to find a way for them not, because to me, those become limitations deeper into the game, where, because you pick up a couple quick fouls. Now you're kind of, come out in the second half, pick up another foul. You got 3 already, and it's early in the third quarter. So with that, but I wanted to point out, I kind of got a little winded there, but I wanted to point out Sydney has been doing a pretty good job on the glass. But, again, it's a team collective effort that we're talking about here. One more grade that I want to think about giving out here. What about the bench? What do you think? What kind of grade would you give the bench so far?
Boy, that's a hard question, Jeff. So let's maybe talk through it before we start throwing grades out. So, Lexi, I think, has been, as we mentioned, with her 19 minutes per game, not 19 points, 19 minutes per game. I think Lexi has obviously been the bench leader in terms of coming in and giving us, some great minutes. Lily's come in, I think, and done some nice things off of the bench as well. And then it kind of drops off pretty quick after that, right? And it's been hit or miss on who is getting in. For a while, Lene was getting in, and now it seems like Juliana LaMendola is getting in more. But it's really been mainly Lexus and Lily. and there's been times where we've gotten just giant goose eggs out of them. So, if we look at their stats on the year, so far, we have Lexi coming in terms of points scoring per game. She is averaging just at around 5 points per game, and Lily is around 4. And then in terms of rebounds, Lily is just averaging, let's see here if I can find it real quick. I think around 3 rebounds per game. So is that what we want from our 2 main bench? And then after that, it doesn't really, there aren't many points to think about. So I guess with all that said, I want more from our bench still. I don't think it's where we need it to be to really be one of those teams to make a deep run into the, NCAA tournament. So I'm probably going to give them a solid C on this one. Just because I just think there's so much more room that we need from our bench. In terms of games played, there's some of our bench that have only even played a few games here and there. So right. What about you? What are your thoughts? I rambled on quite a bit and landed on C.
I'm going to go with a C+. I agree with you. I think we need to get, and I got this in some of our questions we need to get answered. But I do like what Lanae's bringing. I've liked what Jules has brought when they've played. I like to see them get a little more run. That's why the Stetson game I thought was really important. We talked about this in the postgame show. 10 players had double-digit minutes or more against Stetson. And I know that we get into the Big Ten season, that's going to be harder to do. But I just, because I just think you got to find a way for kids like Lanae and Jules, who were pretty decent recruits. I mean, they were fairly high-ranked recruits. You want to get them in there to keep them and throwing them that bone. I think they'll understand they're playing behind some solid vets right now, but I also don't want them getting discouraged to where they're thinking, portal, because there'll be a better opportunity somewhere else. Because next year we're really going to need them. They're going to be key players for us next year. But I agree, we got to get more crooked numbers, as I like to say as a coach. More scoring, more rebounds, more assists. I think there was one game we talked about where the bench gave us no points, no rebounds, like 2 assists. I mean, it was just not a good day for the bench.
Nothing. Yeah.
So I'll give it a C. I'll give it a C there, but or C+. But it's definitely for me a work in progress. So with that, so we also want to mention, Sarah Scalia right now. We've got to give her an A++, as they would say in A Christmas Story. She is 21 of 22 at the free throw line, and she is shooting 45%. What do you think? I don't want to necessarily get a grade, but what do you think so far? I mean, we've shown that at times we can hit the 3, but I don't feel like we're overshooting the 3. Maybe at Stanford, I thought we got in a little bit of love with the 3, especially when we weren't hitting. But what have you thought about our 3-point shooting so far?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, I've been pretty happy with our shot selection. I think it's been pretty good outside of Stanford, to your point. Like that one, they were all out of whack. So I feel like we should almost throw that one out of our sample because all the other games, it seems like their threes have come, in good rhythm and good transition with good ball movement. Often, sometimes we're seeing Mackenzie hitting, out of that double team when it comes to her from the post. So I've been really actually quite happy. I don't think we've mentioned one time on any of our post game, again, outside of Stanford, where we've gone, they just took too many threes, or boy, they shot the ball when they shouldn't have. And, there's been a handful here and there, but overall, I think they've been really good.
I would agree.
And Sarah's shooting 45% from 3. She can shoot it whenever she wants.
Agree with that. So I agree. So I threw this in here, Kathy. I didn't know if you saw it on the run sheet, but just some unanswered questions. And I'll start it out with you, since and I like to call it the alpha. You can call it leader, but I think there is a leader. I think it's Mac. But to me, an alpha is that person who, and this obviously is going to be back to a Grace Berger reference. But there were times I've said this about the men's team over the last few years about who was the alpha. That person who's going to say, "Give me the ball, and I'm going to go get a shot because I'm confident I can make something happen for myself, or I'm going to get it into a position where the defense is going to have to rotate, and I'm going to find the right person at the key moment." So in the absence of Grace Berger, is there somebody that you see who can be that alpha? Because I think that's what successful teams need in tournament play. Somebody has to be that person in crunch time. Who do you think it is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to go with Sarah, actually.
Yeah, real quick, I want to mention, and I will say this for our fans of the podcast. I think it's hard for Mac. Everybody's gonna say, "Well, Mac's that person." I think Mac could be that, but it's hard for a post player to be that true alpha because they aren't the one usually handling the ball. Now, Kathy, exactly. I'll let you go. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, no, that's fine. And I kind of assume this was outside of Mackenzie anyway in terms of leadership. I think Mackenzie's the vocal leader on that floor. We saw it a lot down in Fort Myers, and we could see him in person. Absolutely, the vocal leader in terms of but she's pretty reliant on those guards getting her the ball, and getting her the ball timely and in a good position. So it's hard for her in order to just say, I'm going to take over the game. I think it's got to be Sarah. What we saw from her in Fort Myers, I think shows me she has it within her. Now, can she do it consistently? It seems the last couple of games against Maine and even against Stetson a little bit, she didn't seem quite as aggressive as we saw her down in Fort Myers. So can she be the Fort Myers Sarah that we saw on a consistent basis? And I don't mean putting up 20 points a game like she did in the Tennessee game or the Princeton game. Which one was it?
Princeton, I think.
Yeah, Princeton. I'm not saying she has to produce 28 points a game. Not expecting that. That's unreasonable. But I do think she could be a little more aggressive in terms of getting her shot and driving the ball like we've seen her do. She's forcing turnovers as well on the defensive side. So to me, it's Sarah.
Yeah, and this is one where you almost would really like to say Chloe, but I just don't feel like Chloe's been very aggressive this year. I feel like Chloe was a little more aggressive offensively last year, not only looking for her shot, and she's getting assists, don't get me wrong, but it was more like she created off the dribble, whether for herself or to get somebody else open. But I agree with you about Sarah. I think I would also throw out there maybe Sydney. Sydney may not be quite the dribble penetrator, but I think you get the ball in Sydney's hands. She has the ability to make shots and she has the ability to find people. But I think you may be right. It may be somebody like Sarah who's sometimes just going to put her head down and drive until she gets stopped. But again, I think that's one of those things we're just going to have. It's why, to me, they're unanswered questions. We're going to find out as we go through the season. And I think at the end of the season, we're going to, come back to this and be like, yep, we either found it, or we're going to be talking about, well, this is why we lost in the Sweet 16. As Mike B says in the Workaholics here, to a certain degree, that athleticism, is maybe something that we've got to, overcome anyway. So you brought this up, Kathy, in the grading. Are the issues this team has had on the road symptomatic, or are they fixable? Is it just something we're not going to get, we're just going to have to keep dealing with, or is it fixable?
Personally, I think they're fixable. I trust Coach Morin. She's shown us over the last 7 seasons, now 8, that she knows what she's doing, and her entire coaching staff knows what they're doing in terms of getting the team ready to go. I think it's just going through some learning curve here, some growing pains, if you will, without Grace. I think it was a really big hole to fill, and they're finding their way into that, how to fill that hole again. Sarah, while she started quite a few games, she's got a different kind of a role this year. Chloe seems to be kind of, working on her way, but they're all veteran players, and we have a veteran coaching staff. I trust that they're going to be able to fix them.
Yeah, real quickly. I agree with you. I'm going to kind of move this along a little bit just because we're trying to keep it to a little shorter podcast. Now we're already going past 30 minutes. Yeah. Coach Morin has called out the toughness and defense. I think this kind of goes along with the earlier question. Will she get this back to the normal IU toughness defense that we're used to?
I think we will see it, but less consistently this year. I think there are going to be, I think there are definitely going to be times where it just doesn't show up for us. And honestly, I think that we're probably going to lose a few more games than maybe we expected to, especially those road games, because if your defense doesn't travel, that's going to make it immensely hard when you get into the Big Ten. So I don't think we're going to see the defense that we saw the last 2 years. I think it's going to be a little more inconsistent. And then there's going to be times where it comes out like, the first half of Princeton or that Tennessee game, and they're like, hey, there it is. And then I think it's going to go away again.
That's a good answer. And if we can get it to be just, hopefully not as inconsistent, but if we could find a way to just keep those moments to a short span of, let it be a half a quarter here, right, a quarter there, But again, we've seen it, for example, at Maine. We saw it at half against Princeton. We saw it against pretty much Stanford all day long. So hopefully that Stanford game becomes the outlier at the end of the year. Real quick, Kathy, I'll throw it to you on this one as well. Kind of a dual question. We answered this a little bit already, but do you think we'll get consistent production out of the bench, and will they get consistent minutes once the Big Ten season starts?
Okay. Yeah. So I'll keep this one pretty short. I think in terms of minutes first, I think we're going to see a significant drop off, especially from our two freshmen. Right now, they're both averaging over 10 minutes a game. I don't think that they're going to average 10 minutes a game come Big Ten play, except in maybe a handful of games here and there, like hopefully Rutgers this weekend. I don't think that the production is going to increase from what we've seen from it. I think, again, we're going to have Lexi and Lily come in and give our, some of our starters some respective rest. I don't see that it's going to get a whole lot better this year. I think it's a little better than last year, but I don't think it's going to get a whole lot better from here on out.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of that. I think especially the minutes. I think you're going to see the minutes. Hannah Sandvik has gotten some decent minutes in games this year. I think you're going to see some of those minutes dwindle as we go into the Big Ten season, except like you said, for maybe some games where we can get some big leads and get them some experience as well. So, well, for you guys, that's kind of all the things that, Kathy, do you have anything else? A question you think is kind of an unanswered question?
Not an unanswered, but this is an interesting one that you should answer for Mike B in the chat, where he's wondering, can scheme and basketball smarts offset some of the less athleticism that we may have against other teams?
And a simple answer, yes, but it takes some preparation. You're going to, and obviously at that level, you're doing a lot of scouting. You're going to break down the film. But high basketball IQ can overcome some of that. But there are just going to be times, unfortunately, when a more athletic player is going to isolate you, and good coaches are going to find ways to isolate you or get you into some kind of mismatch, cross match in a transition and take advantage of it. The one thing we do a pretty good job of, but I think one thing you see some of the better teams do against us is put us a little bit of pick and pop, pick and roll type situation where it makes it a little harder for us to keep up with. But yeah, it can be overcome, but but this goes back to what we were just talking about, Kathy, that in the past couple of years, we saw that discipline, that mental toughness from the defensive side of it to make sure that those things didn't just totally, overwhelm us. But this year we struggled with that a little bit. And the girl from Princeton, Chin had a great second half, and we knew she was going to be a good player. All right. But yeah, but scheme and basketball smarts can overcome it, but it just, there's a less margin for error from that standpoint. So good question for Mike B in the Workaholics there. All right. So Kathy, got anything else?
No, I'm ready to wrap it up if you are.
Let's wrap it up. All right. So our next episode of DTW will be Sunday to recap the Rutgers game. That'll be at 6 Eastern, 5 Central. Assembly Call will be on Thursday, tomorrow, with their normal weekly show. And then they'll be on Saturday after the Auburn game with AC post-game show. If you want to see us do the show live and be a part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@ Back Home Network. That's at the @ youtube.com/@ Back Home Network. You can be a part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. Kathy and I are trying to post a little bit more stuff in there and put some more DTW stuff in there. We're not the computer wizards, and so we're trying to get up to speed with some of it. But so you look there for content. I've been trying, as I said, I posted some Charlie Cream stuff from bracketology and net stuff. So we're trying to get in there and give some poll questions, things like that. Kathy does a nice job of getting some chat discussion, trying to get going. So check us out there in the Substack. You can be part of I said that already. Special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our logo. Also, a big thank you to Bob Thompson for our new music that you've heard throughout the broadcast. And finally, Kathy, I forgot. I didn't mean to forget, but I did. I want to throw it back to you real quick. Got any final thoughts or last call here for you?
No, I think, we're record wise. I think we're, like I had predicted, actually a game ahead of where I predicted. So record wise, I think we're there. I think there's definitely some things to work on with this team. But Coach Moore and her staff, I trust them completely. So I'm just looking forward to the rest of the year and getting into the heart of the Big Ten season and seeing how they handle all of that. I think it's going to be an interesting ride this year. I think it's going to be a bit of more of a roller coaster for sure than it was last year.
Right now, I would totally agree with that. That's a great assessment. And so we want to thank all of you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you on Sunday. We'll be, until then, keep your elbows in, your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Did that music sound weird?
Or a little bit. It sounded okay to me, but it was might have had a little bit. But anyway, hey, that was fun. This was fun. It went a little longer than we planned on, but it was fun. There was some good. That was good discussion.
Yeah, you had some great questions in there. I know I had not seen them ahead of time, so I was completely going off the seat of my pants there. So
but it's we don't get to do enough. It's like during the season, it seems like we're always doing post game shows, and
yes,
so
I don't think we got to do that the last 2 seasons, but we had this nice long break with no men, no women's games here on this day, and it worked out really well schedule wise. So that was fun to be able to kind of look at it from a more of a 50,000 foot level than we usually do. So it was good.
And to kind of break the season down by a quarter. That was kind of those things I used to do as a coach. I always felt, and I think a lot of coaches do. I'm not going to say all of us do, but I think a lot of coaches break it down to a fourth of the season, and so on. So a really good point to be able to come in here and break it down. And like I said, I had to go back and watch the earlier episode and Andy was with us that day. I should have had Andy's results and what he said just to see if we could get people to remember.
We should have pulled him.
We should have pulled. We should have been like, hey, Andy, come in here. But no. So anyway, appreciate everybody being here and watching on the live YouTube or wherever you're listening on your favorite podcast. So we appreciate everything. So, but Kathy, great job. I know you're trying to work, kind of a job and a half right now, or almost 2 full jobs with your, transition into your different role with your company. So I'm going to get us out of here and I'll talk to you on Sunday.
Sounds good. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Everybody, see ya.